Hi everyone, my name is Nathan from jazzguitarlessons.net and welcome back to the jazzguitarlessons.net Q&A webinar that we host monthly. It's every third Wednesday of the month. Today is Wednesday, October the 16th of 2019, and today we're going to be talking a lot about the one of the Tune of the Month Club songs that we haven't covered yet in a webinar. So we're going way back to, I think, like the 16th or 18th or something issue of the Tune of the Month Club called Misty. Misty is this incredibly beautiful ballad, absolutely classic. Errol Garner is the composer. Just beautiful. It's definitely one of those must-learns in your jazz repertoire. I'm just going to check my volume real quick to make sure you can actually hear me. Wow, wasn't that amazing? That was great. Cool. So I'm just checking this. I'm keeping an eye on the stream to make sure that we're not experiencing any technical difficulties, but also to make sure that if any of you have any questions, then you can mention them in the chat. If you're joining me live on youtube.com, the YouTube website, and not the jazzguitarlessons.net website, nor the JGL members forum on Facebook. You can watch from there, but what you really want to do is actually make sure you click on the little YouTube icon that's embedded in the video, and you'll end up on the youtube.com website watching it live there. And in so doing, and if you are signed into a Google account, like a YouTube account or a Gmail account or something like that, then you can actually watch the stream live and comment and ask questions. There's a little chat box, I think, on the right-hand side or the bottom right-hand side of the screen, depending on your video settings. And in that chat box, you can type in your questions. You can ask me anything you'd like. Maybe ask me to slow down, clarify, go over a topic I just mentioned, again, from a different point of view, anything you'd like. So I'll be keeping an eye on that throughout the stream. Like I said, the Q&A webinar happens at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, so Toronto time or New York time, for those of you US-minded. On the third Wednesday of the month, every month, and we're going over. We finished our run of the Tune of the Month Club's songs, and now we're working on the backlog of songs that we actually didn't film a webinar for. So we're doing that now, filling in the gaps. So Misty, beautiful tune. It's in the key of E flat major. As always, I like to start off with the lead sheet harmonic analysis. So what we're going to do is take a look at the lead sheet, and I'm going to give you a quick harmonic analysis of the whole piece. Normally, or we used to do this using the screen share function. So I'd share my screen and you can see the lead sheet that I have loaded up here on my computer screen yourself, as if you were looking at my screen. And then I'd talk it over. But we can't do that anymore on using the YouTube live stream options. There's no screen share option available anymore. At least using the tools that we have. So instead, what we're going to do is, which worked out pretty nicely last time, is I'm going to actually have a printed out lead sheet right here, and we're going to go low tech. So I'm just going to point a camera at this lead sheet right here, this piece of paper. We're going analog, everybody, and I'm going to use a marker to write down the various things that we have to talk about this lead sheet and the chord functions and everything like that. So let's take a look right now. Let's get started. So hopefully you can see this. I'm actually going to pull up, it'll just take me a moment to set up here. I'm going to put this up on the screen over here. All right, great. So hopefully you'll be able to see this okay. We'll start up at the top here. We'll just look at the first two, the first A sections. Hopefully you'll be able to read this all right. And I think my screen is flipped. I'm just going to check right now just to make sure you guys can actually see this all right. Yeah, okay. It totally flips the screen back. That's great. All right, here we go. So here's what we want to talk about. The song is in the key of E flat major. And most of you will get kind of freaked out by the fact that to start off with, you start with a bar of E flat major. Hey, that sounds pretty great. And you immediately get an B flat minor 7 followed by an E flat 7 in the second bar. So this is the pickup, first bar, second bar. And you'll get freaked out by this because you're like, wait, whoa, that doesn't look like E flat major. That looks like A flat major. We have a key change in the second bar. That sucks. That sounds so crazy. It's overwhelming. Fret not. This is perfectly normal. And I want you to try and keep in mind that this whole song, at least the A sections, you can view them entirely within the perspective of the key of E flat major, where E flat is home. And that'll actually make things way simpler. There's just a little bit of jazz elaboration happening here, using secondary dominants to guide the ear towards another key landmark within the key of E flat major. So let's talk about that. First of all, let's just do the harmonic analysis. E flat major, I'm going to put a bit of light here. Hopefully I can point it well enough here. Looks good. Sorry, guys. Sorry, everybody. This is just going to take a second. There we are. Okay, so we got a bit more light on the situation here. We're shedding a little bit more light on it. E flat major 7. That's our 1 chord. Awesome. And I do want to note that this is the we're actually landing on beat 1 with the 7th, the major 7th of E flat major 7 is a really big tension note. So if you look at me, you really want to, like, your voice really wants to it really wants to resolve upward to the tonic of E flat, but it doesn't. So it's a really crunchy start. It's got this really melancholy feeling at the beginning of it because of that tension between the D natural and in the melody and the E flat root of the bass. So right off the bat, we're starting off pretty crunchy. It's harmonically rich. Just something to note with the melody. We're going to talk more about the chords here, but let's go on. So right away, we go to the 5 chord, and we're like, hey, that's 5, but it's minor. It's B flat minor 7. That's so strange. So instead, we're going to look at this in terms of a secondary dominant, a secondary 2-5 of 4. It's a secondary 2-5 of 4. So we're basically just using a little bit of elaboration on the harmonic progression, and the melody too. Actually, goes, instead of landing on a D, it lands on a D flat. So the D note has been changed. The D pitch class has been modified to a D flat. Da 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 da, because that D flat da da wants to lead back nicely to that C natural in the third of this A flat major 7 chord. So it just leads the ear really nicely, really strongly to A flat major 7. It feels like it doesn't feel like a key change when you actually listen to it. It feels just like a temporary modulation, a temporary, like a momentary shift in the notes to give you a much more strong resolution to A flat major 7. So that's what that's for. Fret not. It's just 1, and then some stuff that happens that brings you to 4. That's perfectly normal in any song that we listen to, going moving from the 1 chord to the 4 chord. It's just like, wow, that's totally normal music, you know? This stuff is where the jazz elaboration happens. Cool, whatever. And then, hey, we get some more of that stuff here. A flat minor 7 to D flat 7, going to, that sounds like it goes to what's it called? That sounds like it goes to the flat 3 chord, the G flat chord, which is like, that doesn't belong in the key of E flat at all. This is even weirder than the second bar. The 4th bar is even weirder than the second bar. What's happening here? And again, fret not, it's not totally crazy. Let me just explain in a second. So this is actually the flat 7 chord, if you were to analyze it against the key of E flat. But really, we don't have to worry about that too much. This is, in fact, a 2-5. Oh, I should have done this, sorry. This is a 2-5 leading to 1. It's actually heading back to 1. So this 2-5, A flat minor 7, D flat 7 leads nicely back to 1. And you're saying, hey, Nathan, what the heck? That's crazy. That's not 2-5 of E flat. That 2-5 of G flat. A flat minor 7, D flat 7 leads to G flat? Question mark? What? An exclamation point, because we're really, really confused by it. But no, in this case, no, we can actually use it as what's called the back door. The back door 2-5-1. It's the back door of E flat. It's a colloquial jazz term to refer to how the 5 chord, the D flat 7, resolves to E flat major 7, not from the typical 5-1, that the fifth so do, not that sort of 5-1 kind of root motion, but from a flat 7 to 1. It comes in from the back door, as they say. It just rises from te do, or sorry, te do. It wasn't quite on pitch there. So that is the D flat 7 resolving to E flat major 7, and that's a very, very common thing to do. Minor 4 acting as a backdoor 2 to the backdoor 5 to 1. And you'll see that actually in a lot of different songs. You'll see that happen in There Will Never Be Another You. I can't think of any other off the top of my head, but this is just a really good example of, this is the most complicated part of the song. That's it. And it sets the tone for other stuff that happens later. So we'll see that in a second. But we have the 1 chord, big landmark. The 4 chord, big landmark. And then we come back to the 1 chord. It's almost like a blues in that regard, 1-4-1, but not quite. It's not quite the blues. However, we will come back to that later on, this bluesy idea in the single note solo section that we'll tackle, that I'll explain. So with that said, it's just these major landmarks that you're guiding the ear towards. We're landing on 1. And then we have this stuff that happens that brings us this 2-5 stuff, this sort of secondary dominant stuff that brings us to 4. And this more secondary-ish dominant, it's not really secondary dominance, it's a substituted dominant of the normal 2-5, which is F minor 7 to B flat 7. We don't have that here. That's here, F minor 7, B flat 7. That leads us to, that's the traditional 2-5 that brings us back to 1, E flat. And instead we have the back door 2-5, the backdoor 2-5 that leads us back to 1. Great. And then we have a pretty typical progression, a pretty typical chord cycle. Sorry, that's a 1 6 2 5. There's our normal 2-5, our actual 2-5. And then instead of resolving to 1, we actually kind of want to continue the line. The phrase isn't yet complete. We need 2 extra bars to really get that rounded out traditional 8-bar phrase. So instead of resolving to 1, we resolve to a related chord, the 3. You'll notice that the 3 and the 1 share a lot of common notes. So this is a perfectly valid move, 5 to 3. It's very typical to move from the 5 chord to the 3 chord to extend the phrase. E flat major 7, for example, is a E flat, G, B flat. Sorry, markers are really hard, and D. But G minor 7 is G. Oh, this is E flat. Oh shoot, E flat major. I didn't leave myself enough room. E flat major 7. Wow, you cannot read that. I'm very sorry. But this is G minor 7. G flat, or sorry, G, B flat, D. Notice how they share these 3 notes already, and then we're missing an F. So that's E flat major 7, E flat, G, B flat, D, and this is G minor 7, G, B flat, D, F. And notice how they share these 3 notes. So they have a lot in common with each other because they share so many notes in common. It's very easy to resolve from 5 to 3 instead of 5 to 1. It doesn't sound complete, which is exactly what we're looking for. We want to continue the phrase. So we go from 3 to a dominant 6, or as the 6 as a secondary dominant, which leads nicely to 2. So that's basically that's basically a 2-5 of 2. It's a 2-5 of 2. So 3-6, 2-5. So secondary dominant here that leads to 2-5. You'll see this often. 3-6, 2-5 is this really nice daisy chain 2-5. 2-5 to 2, 2-5 to 1. It happens very, very, very often that you'll see that. So we got 1. Great. And the first ending, it's just 1. It just ends on 1. You can sometimes you could put like a B flat 7 here. I'm writing at a very awkward angle, and I'm having a hard time like writing legibly because of it. Sorry about that, everybody. But sometimes you'll have the B flat 7 there if you want to. It's not really necessary. The whole idea is that we could just elaborate and give some chord motion back to E flat 7 when we. Oh shoot! Sorry. Wow, I screwed this up. No, I wasn't even looking at the repeats. I totally got turned around. This is the 3-6, 2-5 that leads back to E flat. There's the repeat sign. Sorry, I totally lost my train of thought there. The 2-5 leads back to 1, and we start the process again. We got that landmark 1, a secondary dominant secondary 2-5 that leads to 4, a backdoor 2-5 that leads back to 1, 6, 2, 5, second ending on 1. Nice. Sometimes what I should have written here, sometimes what you'll get is a D flat 7, and then right here. Sometimes you'll get that there, and then you'll end back on E flat major 7. So you get this sort of sound that's actually pretty bluesy because of this additional backdoor 5, D flat 7. It's just like that D flat 7 right here, and so you get this sort of thing happen where you're all like 2, 5, 1, D flat, flat's the flat 7, 1. You get that sometimes. So a lot of people will play it that way, where it's like 1, 1, D flat or D flat, and then back to 1. And so it's kind of bluesy sounding. It's really nice. I enjoy it. It's a really neat sound that you get, and it's kind of emblematic of a lot of the way that a lot of people end up playing Misty. So that's it for the A sections. The second A section takes much the same arc as the second ending of the first A section. So that's the last A section. Again, you got 1, 2, 5 to 4, backdoor 2, 5 to 1, and then 6, 2, 5, 1. And again, sometimes this is the nice turnaround that you have for the to come back to the top of the form. But sometimes you just get this instead. You get D flat 7, and then to E flat major 7 to round out the song. And sometimes you just get it like that. So it really depends on how you want to play it. Just the thing that I just played, that's what you'll get sometimes. Otherwise, you get a 2-5 back, like just a regular 2-5 that brings you back to the top of the form. That's your turnaround. Now, the B section right now is starting from here. And that right there is, we're actually starting on the 2, 5 of 4. It's just like what we saw in the second and third bars, but expanded out instead of taking up the half note harmonic rhythm, 2 beats per chord, and then ending on A flat major 7. Instead of that, we're getting 1 full bar, or 4 beats per chord. 4 beats for B flat minor 7, 4 beats for E flat 7, and then twice as much for A flat major 7. So we're just expanding it out into double the harmonic rhythm, or not double, but it takes double the amount of time to play the same chord progression, or chord progression. So anyway, this is a 2 chord. at B flat minor 7. 2 of 4, right? This is the 5 chord of 4. And this is the 1 chord of, it's the 4 of the original key, but it is the 1 chord right now. We've in this section, it really does feel like an actual key change, an actual modulation to the 4 chord when compared to the same progression happening in the 2nd and 3rd bar. This feels way more temporary because it's a lot shorter, but this feels like, hey, we're playing that D flat note for a long time. It feels like a real chord progression rather than a sort of momentary voice leading thing. Nah, we're in the key of A flat now. So this is definitely a 2, 5, and then 1 in the key of A flat major. So that it just feels much more permanent that time. And we get to this line that leads us nicely to the second half of the B section, and we get another 2-5 of G this time, the 2-5 of 3. And this time it feels a lot more different because we have a different set of notes, and we have an A natural in the bass, and no more D flat from previous. So this feels like a much bigger change. This whole B section feels unsteady. It just feels. I really should have given myself more space, but it feels unstable. Our ears know we have played. Our ears know that we've come from the key of E flat major, and now we're making this shift to A flat major, but then there's an A natural in it, and just like basically notes that are coming from the key of G major, and it doesn't. I don't know. It feels kind of unstable, is what's going on, and it definitely is unstable when you see the amount of chord harmonic elaboration that's happening here. This is definitely a 2 of G, and this is definitely a 5 of G. But then what the heck is this F7? Oh, well, we had something like that before. This backdoor D flat. We had that backdoor D flat 7, and again we had that backdoor D flat 7. Well, if we apply the same rules, we can take that backdoor 5 of G, backdoor of G. It's the backdoor 5 of G. It's the backdoor substitute. So D7 is the normal 5. F7 is the substituted 5 that acts as that's called the backdoor 5, and it approaches G from below by whole step. F natural, a whole step up, and we reach G. And then we get this similar 3, 6, 2, 5 that we saw before of E flat major. Sorry, I went to the wrong one. E flat major 7. I'm looking at things sideways. It's hard to know what I'm looking at sometimes. So this 3-6-2-5, we've seen it before. We saw it in the first ending of the A section. I know we've added like a flat 5 to the G minor 7 flat 5 and a flat 9 to the C7 flat 9. All that's doing is that it's just giving us by the way, those two notes are the same thing. The flat 5 of G is A flat, and nope, sorry, I was thinking of flat 13. My bad. This is just giving us a more minor sound heading to F minor. It's like, hey, this is a 2-5 of F minor, 5 of this chord. It just leads the ear more strongly to the F minor, and then that in turn leads us to the 5 and then to the 1 in E flat major. So that's the lead sheet. That's what's going on with Misty. It's a bit of a cool piece of music. It's really it's rather well, it's classic, and it has all these chord changes in it that are very. There's no other way to say it, but they're just very jazzy. You know, like they just sound like jazz. So if you have any questions about that, give me a shout at nathan@jazzguitarlessons.net. It's actually a lot simpler than you think, but it looks daunting at first. But really all you have is these big landmarks, 1, 4, back to 1, and then this cycle that brings you back to 1, this typical cycle, 1, 6, 2, 5, 3, 6, 2, 5. Easy, brings you back to 1. And then the B section is where it gets weird. It's a 2-5 in the key of A flat, the 4 chord, formerly the 4 chord, and then a 2-5 to the 3 chord, which actually does bring us to the functional 3, 6, 2, 5, back to E flat. Well, I'm supposed to be singing a D there, but whatever. Back to the E flat chord, and we got that crunch between the E flat and the major 7th, the D, instead of E flat. Okay, so that is the song, and I wanted to mention that. Yeah, actually, that's pretty much all I wanted to mention for it. So let's talk about the chord melody. We're running a little bit behind time. I know that took a little bit longer than usual. I'm sorry about that. But the chord melody, there's a lot going on in here, but there are 2 main things that I wanted to talk about real quick. The chord melody has these really great sections that of reharmonization, where you're hearing a lot more elaborations on that basic structure of chords that I outlined. Again, you have to look at this very functionally. We have a big landmark 1, and then we have this big landmark 4. And so a lot of the reharmonizations that you end up hearing in the chord melody are, well, how do we elaborate more and create more tension in the transitions between those landmarks? So 1, and then we have dominant functioning chords that bring us to 4. So sometimes that's like easily enough, that's B flat minor to E flat 7, that brings us to A flat. That's what usually happens, but maybe we could do more with it. Maybe we could first of all use more altered extensions on the E flat 7 to really bring that out. And so in the sound slice for the chord melody, I'm going to be referring to measure numbers based on the sound slice, and for some reason the sound slice counts the pickup measure as its own measure. So the measure numbers I'm going to be saying here are going to be different from the PDF. I'm sorry. Just subtract the measure number by 1 that I'm talking about to find the corresponding measure in the PDF. Sound good? So measure 3 is what we want to look at. And here's how it goes. I'll point it out when it happens.
It's 17:30.
So what you heard there is the same sort of 2-5, but then when we got heading to A flat major 7, the 4 chord, but when we got to that 5 of 4, the E flat 7, we gave it a bunch of alterations that are, well, they're pretty cool. And there's one in particular that I wanted to point out as a must learn. So what we have here is this. I'll just play it for you real quick. I won't use a pick because it's supposed to be fingerstyle on this one, but you could play it without a pick, or you could play it with a pick if you want to. A lot of it. So you get this. Sorry. And then you have this chord, which is an E flat 7. There's my shell. I'm just playing it rootless. I got the 3rd and the minor 7th, major 3rd and the minor 7th. And then you get the flat 9. Ooh, that sounds pretty juicy. You get this F flat note, or E natural if you want to call it that. F flat, functionally speaking. And you get the 13. That's the melody, so that's important. But this structure is actually really cool. And I'll talk about it in a second, but I'll just play the rest of it first. You get the sharp 9 in this one along with the 5th in the melody. So, and then you get this chord, which is the flat 7, the flat 13, and then the root, and then the 3rd of the chord of this E flat 7 flat 13 chord. So we had a E flat 7, E flat 13 with the flat 9, but then we changed that 13 to a flat 13 in the 2nd chord and on the 4th beat of measure 3 in the sound slice. And then we have this. Sorry. And that's just your A flat major 7 chord elaborated a little bit. And it sounds pretty. It's just nice. But after all that tension, right? It just feels like a release. So that's what I want to impress upon you here, is that all the reharmonizations that happen here are, generally speaking, or most of the reharmonizations that are happening here are a function of trying to build up tension to lead the ear towards those major landmarks that I mentioned in the harmonic analysis. So that measure 3 is pretty cool. As a must-learn moment, I do want to say this shape is great. So it's on measure. It's measure 3 beat measure 3 in the sound slice, beat 3, and it's that E flat 13. It's an E flat chord. It's an E flat dominant chord with a 13th, a natural 13th in it. E flat 13 with a flattened 9. And so that's on string 4. Starting on string 4, you have your first finger on the 5th fret, your second finger on the 6th fret, the first finger barring across to the 5th fret again, and then your pinky hitting the 13th up top on fret 8. What's really cool about this is if you move it to a different place, you'll get different notes for that E flat chord. So there's my root. You can think of your root, the same root, here, up on the 11th fret, E flat on the 11th fret of the 6th string, and you actually move your fingers underneath that, starting at the 11th fret, so you get 11, 12, 11, 14. You get the same structure, but different notes, the same, different notes arranged in the same structure as you were playing down here. And because they're different notes, they have a different relationship to E flat, and so you get this chord, which is a, you get the flat 7, the 3rd. You got your guide tones again. That's good. You get the 5th of the chord. Hey, that's like just the upper structure of E flat 7. Nice. That's pretty typical. But the weird note in this is this high note, this sharp 9, the F sharp. Pretty cool note. So yeah, same structure, different notes, and so it's a pretty multifunctional chord. We had a challenge, a members forum challenge that was similar to this, where we took a chord shape, which is actually this one here, and we got different extensions over the same chord depending on which place you played it in. Same structure, like E flat 7 sharp 9 flat 13, over to E flat 13 with the natural 9. So sharp 9 and flat 13 versus natural 9 and natural 13. Two very different sounds. Sorry, give me a sec. Right? Same structure, different notes, same root. So that's a must learn. I'd say grab that chord shape and use it over dominant chords wherever you can, in at least 2 different positions for the same dominant chord to get a different set of notes, just like I had mentioned there, those 2 different shapes. That's a pretty cool one. I like that one a lot. For further reharmonizations, I'd also suggest checking out the measures 25 to 26. I'm looking at some notes here on my other screen. Measures 25 to 26 sound like this. Oh, sorry. It's not loading very well. Might take a moment. This is the end of the B section. So you got the 2, 5, and you're like, yeah, cool. Back to 1, back to E flat major, right? It's totally normal. Right, cool, nice. That sounds beautiful, right? 2, 5. It's exactly as expected, but then we do this. Or sorry. And you're like, this is leading my ear somewhere different, and it's not where I expect it to go. Oh, that's not E flat. That's not an E flat chord. That's C minor. C minor is the relative minor. So we actually did a 2-5. Oh, sorry. So instead of resolving to the major 1 chord, we're resolving to instead we're leading the ear to the relative minor of E flat. So the 6th of E flat is C. That's your relative minor, and it changes the way that this melody feels. Instead of this, that has like a melancholy to it. It's kind of wistful, but there's sparks of joy in it, right? This is about reharmonization for the purposes of storytelling, for the purposes of narrative, and that's how you want to use reharmonization, because it makes people feel a different way about the same thing. It's coloring it differently, coloring the same picture in a different light, and painting the same picture in a different light, and getting a slightly different story out of it than you would normally expect. So, so this part's really cool. I love this about this chord melody. Oh, sorry. Sorry. Yeah, so B flat 7, and then you get the D minor 7 with the flat 13, G7 sharp 5, and then ending on C minor 9, or C minor add 9. It's just a C minor triad, and then we're adding the 9th. There's no 7th as an intermediary, and that's a really cool sudden change. So one thing about this is that if you've seen any of my webinars before, I've talked a lot about the minor cliche line. It's that sort of minor line. Especially over My Funny Valentine, that's like the classic use of the descending minor cliche line. And a variation on this minor cliche descending line is a minor cliche ascending line, and it's a minor cliche because it's minor harmony, and it's definitely a cliche. It's been used so many times. It's like that lick basically is what we're saying about it. But there's an ascending line which is more James Bond-ish. It's a little bit more mysterious. Sorry, that was my windowsill. So you get this like ascending line starting from the 5th of the minor chord. C, E flat, G, A flat, or G sharp if you want. A natural, B flat, so it turns into a C minor 7 chord. So you get this. And it actually leads the ear to the B flat note that we're going to play in the melody. Right? Sorry. And it changes the way that part feels. That minor cliche line is an example of what's called internal voice leading, where one of the inner notes of the chord, one of the not the top note, not the bottom note, but one of the inner notes starts moving, usually in a very simple way, half steps or whole steps, depending on the scale. But usually chromaticism is really nice. It's a really nice way to voice lead. Sorry. And it leads us to the B flat note. The whole idea is voice leading is leading the ear to strong resolutions. So that's one example of it, the minor cliche line. Another example of voice leading used in this chord melody is the measure 4. Measure 4 has an example. Measure 4 in the sound slice is it's on the A flat major 7 chord. It's just that this one. And this isn't exactly internal voice leading, but it's a matter of it's a little bit more on the counterpoint side of things. The melody ends its phrase on the C note, and we use some internal chord voicing to lead to that note, and then also create motion around it. You get this static note in the melody, and you get some voice leading underneath it. Some motion underneath it to contrast the static nature of just holding that C note. Now, if you just did that with your guitar, if you just played just C major 7, be like, yeah, that's cool, but maybe that feels a lot more elaborate and interesting in that regard. So Joe Pass said a lot, fill the space. If there's some amount of space left by the melody, fill it with some chord stuff, chord motion or arpeggiation in this case. You have the chord and you just right hand stuff. And then we change the chord voicing on the third beat, whatever. Or on the second beat, sorry, because it's 16th notes. So that's another example of it. Measure 28, there's the same thing but simpler. So again, it's actually the same. It's the last A section in the same place, and we have these comping 101 shell voicings that we know, like A flat major 7 and A flat 6. It's a very simple version of internal voice leading. We take the middle voice and we move it, and we take the outer voices and we don't move them. Right, easy. And we can just spice it up a little bit by creating a little bit of using a chromatic passing tone in between the 7th of this A flat major 7, A flat C, E flat G, G flat F, heading to the 13th of the chord. So from the 7th to the 13th. Oh, sorry. That's what we got there. That's right. Oh my gosh. And it just extends the line without having to extend the line. It creates a little bit more motion and interest that way. A different there's something slightly more complex in measure 5, which is a little bit internal voice leading, like two parallel internal voice leading with two voices. So in this case, it's not internal; it's exposed. There's no bass note below it, but you get this. So you get the da 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 da, and it creates some like that top note is supposed to be. It's supposed to be pretty much static. It stays where it is. It gets repeated a few times. You get this nice happening below it. And then measure 14 has one more example, which is using its implied internal line, implied by an arpeggio. Sorry, I'll lead up to it. So you get the internal line happening with notes on the top and bottom surrounding them, but not all at the same time. So check out measure 14. That's a really good another example of internal voice leading used in a different way. So there's a lot of ways of going about this, but study up on these particular examples and try to fit them into your own playing. Here are some must-learn moments in the chord melody. I'll rattle them off real quick. Measure 3, beat 3. It's that, I already mentioned that, that's that chord voicing, that upper structure chord voicing of E flat 13 flat 9 or E flat 7 sharp 9. There's the sharp 9 up top. And the next one is measure 9, which actually this part's really cool. Measure 9 is kind of weird because it's written it's momentarily a bar of 5/4. The reason for that is because it was hard to notate it a different way. I think Nicolas Ferrand didn't want to put like a different type of notation for some of it. So instead, he just gave the bar an extra beat to sort of denote what he's doing in free time a little bit more easily. So all I'm concerned with for this part is I just wanted to explain that what's going on in that bar if you're looking at it right now. 5/4. It's a lot simpler than you think. It's just that he's laying out the free time in something a little bit more metered. That's all. But what I'm really concerned with is the F7 flat 9 and B flat 9 sus that's happening at the in the first 2 beats. First 3 beats of that bar, measure 9. This happens at the end of the first A section. So it's a 2/5 back to E flat. So we got this. Sorry, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then da. It's supposed to go da da da. It's supposed to go there. Sorry, I was in the wrong key. What am I doing? Tired, guys. Sorry. Right, 2, 2, 2, 2, 5, and then we're back to the 1, the first bar of the next A section. Instead of playing it like that, we play it where the 2 chord, instead of being minor, we play it as a dominant chord. It's a secondary dominant of 5. It's the 5 of 5. F7, instead of being the 2 now, it's now the 5 of 5. Because it leads to B flat nicely. So it's a little bit more strong. Right? It leads there nicely. We're going to also add the flat 9 in. And in the key that we're in, E flat major, we got this G flat note. And that's the minor third. So playing this in a major key, this dominant chord implying a minor sound in a major key, that's very bluesy. That's super bluesy. And so you get this. And that's really implying some blues sound to this chord melody, to this particular turnaround. Let's see here. Yeah, that's pretty much the hallmark of blues, mixing the major and minor sound, the major 1 and the minor 1 sound, and implying it. This line is actually very, very similar to the melody of, I think it's the second last phrase in the melody to "Goodbye Pork Pie Hat." It's a Charles Mingus tune. You should really listen to it. It's a classic jazz blues or jazz. It's not a jazz blues form, but it's a jazz bluesy sound. Like it's. Ba 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 da ba 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 da. It's similar to that, but I think it might be played in a different key. Anyway, so that's a really cool one. Check out "Goodbye Pork Pie Hat." Really good recording by Mingus, and it's a classic. Another must-learn moment in the chord melody, measure 12. Check out measure 12. Measure 12 has, you know how that's part of the melody to Misty. It's this A flat major 7 arpeggio starting in triplets, starting on the 7th and moving up through the root, 3rd, 5th, 7th again, and then landing on the 9th of the chord. But now the chord is minor, and so it changes that landing on the 9th. It feels different than it would have if we stayed on the major 9, right? So there's the A flat minor 9. Right? So one way to play that, instead of just, you can totally do that. That's totally fine. But one way to elaborate on that a little bit more is do the parallel harmony thing. And in particular, instead of just like harmonizing a third below the entire time, one really cool way of doing this is actually take a page out of the one of our courses, All the Arpeggios You Are. It's a guest course from Greg Emiro from Montreal. And it shows you how you can basically play an arpeggio harmonized with the same arpeggio but starting on a different note. So in this case, if we're starting on the 7th in the melody, start with the root on the bottom and then just move those two arpeggios up the way you normally would. Root goes up to third, seventh goes up to root. And you can keep, and then you can keep going. And one of them goes up to the ninth at the end of it. The lower note actually goes up to the major through the A flat major 9 arpeggio, and then resolves. But it adds that little bit of extra richness to it. Sorry. And then you end on this nice A flat minor 9 or A flat minor add 9 voicing. So that's one thing I think you should learn. It's a really good way of elaborating on an arpeggio instead of just playing the arpeggio, which does sound really cool. If you're going to play it three times because there's 3 A sections and you find this arpeggio, it's like, okay, well, instead of doing that again, instant interest, instant extra richness for the arpeggio, for the harmony. I also want to say there's a really cool ending in this. Measure 16, the ending of the second A section. It sounds like this. It's not major 7th. It's not seventh chord harmony. It's the one chord as a triad. Using that, right? That internal voice leading. Sorry, there we are. To get that da da da, and it's simple. It's E flat major, A flat the 4, A flat major the 4 chord, the minor 4 chord A flat minor, and then just the E flat triad again, but with the B flat, the 5th in the top note. So it's pretty universal because it's great for any ending that ends on the 1 chord on the tonic note, on the root of the 1 chord, which is E flat, which is pretty much every song. Every jazz standard wants to, the ending phrases always want to resolve to the 1, like in every way. The key is E flat. The melody wants to resolve on E flat, and the chords want to resolve on E flat. So great, this is perfect. And then create some extra motion while still staying on that same melody note. You could even add the E flat again at the end just to drive the point home. So great. Learn that. It's universal. You can use that anywhere. You could do that in the key of, let's say, like F major or something. Oh. And there's something really, really poignant about that A flat minor chord, that 4 minor chord. It's borrowing from the minor mode, and it gives it a bit of wistfulness, you know. That's it for the chord melody. I'm taking a long time to do all this stuff. Sorry, guys. But I do want to talk about the comping study next. The comping study is, we still have the comping study and the single note solo to go. So I'll see if I can crack through these real quick. The comping study is pretty advanced. It's definitely for those of you, or the majority of it is for those of you who are beyond the comping 101 and comping 102 course material and want to create a little bit more motion in your comping than just being like, well, here's a voicing that you can use to play a minor 7th chord. Great, you're great. Play it with a different rhythm too, Charleston rhythm, right? Maybe you want a little bit more motion at that point. Maybe you've got a good handle on that and you're like, I want to create more motion. So then the exercise here is that we're actually going to be, instead of being like, let's just do a bunch of inversions of chords, even going beyond that, the idea is to be more melodic with your harmony and to follow a melody, a simple melody that you can create, or following your ear with a melody and finding chords that harmonize underneath that well, and that still outline the actual harmony of the song. So here's the example. It's basically just creating a chord melody with your own melody of the song. So using the same chords. That's kind of the idea that you want to take into consideration, but keep it simple so that you don't have to do crazy stuff and figure it out on the fly. This takes a lot of practice to do, by the way, and I'll get to how to do that. But here's how it sounds. The first few bars sound. Ba, 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 da. Like that's a pretty simple melody. But it's still a little bit complex for those of you dipping your toes in for the first time. And there's a lot of chords going on here. The whole idea is just making sure that the notes that you're using to support those melody notes are notes primarily from the chords you're playing, or reharmonized to lead the ear towards those chords at key moments, on the downbeats, for example. So there's like a few secondary dominants happening in there. There's a few tritone substitutions that are happening in there. All sorts of stuff to lead the ear. It gets complicated in this comping study, and a lot of it are all these 3-note voicings that loosely outline the harmony of the moment underneath that, while following that melody that our ears are naturally going to. Here's how to do it more simply. You can create your own similar exercise that's a lot simpler at first by starting with a simple stepwise melody. Ba 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 da 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 da. Oh, sorry, I'll start in key. Ba ba da da dee da 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 da. So for the first bar, you might want to just play eighth notes or even quarter notes, maybe like that. Ba 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 da da. Right, da da. And then second bar, because I'm playing in quarter notes. Da 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 da. And that's a much more. It sounds like this without stopping. I'm following the melody of the song, right? Now, so that's something you can do that to lead your ear in different ways. Once you get once you amass a certain or a comprehensive number of chord voicings that you're confident moving around the neck very easily. Takes a lot of practice, but it's very worth it to start doing exercises like this where you're practicing moving chords melodically, creating motion that way. Now, a word of warning, in an ensemble, this requires a lot of tact and a lot of listening. You got to make sure you're listening. You can't do this over a solo forever.
It's 18 hours.
It's the musical equivalent of talking over the soloist, which is very rude, right? Like if you were doing that in a conversation, that'd be very rude. You're not listening clearly. So instead, you have to find pockets or opportunities that are created by gaps in the soloists playing. It's kind of like what I was talking about before about filling the space, a Joe pass, creating motion during long held notes or repeated notes or just rests in the soloist's playing. And in that moment, you can create motion underneath it that draws attention away from the melody and creates more interest. And then you got to make sure you stop at some point too, because then you have to leave space for the soloist to start playing again. Takes a lot of listening, takes a lot of intuition and practice, or intuition developed through practice by conversing with other soloists often, playing with other soloists often, comping for other soloists often. And in so doing, you get this really interesting kind of playing that someone like Ed Bickert might be playing to accompany Paul Desmond, for example. The whole idea is making sure that you're having a conversation with the other musicians. That's the idea behind it. It's a musical conversation. So that's my word of warning for that. Must-learn moments. I'm going to go rapid fire through this. There's this really solid 3-6-2-5 turnaround. It's busy, but it's okay in Misty. At measure 7, it's the last two bars of the A section. Or it's the last bar. Yeah, it's the last two bars of the A section. It sounds like this. And it sounds really, really, really cool because the whole idea is that you're you're doing the 3-6-2-5 thing, but you're putting tritone substitutions leading to, or half step above approaches from comping 102 before the next chord to lead the ear towards the next chord, while simultaneously having this repeated melody ba, 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 with changing chords underneath. So I love that. It's great. You get this sort of thing. Sorry. Sorry. Oh, yeah, sorry. My bad. And then that. And then this cool chord at the end. Or, which is a tritone sub of B flat 7, which leads nicely to E flat major 7 from a half step above. So an easy way to approach this one is to actually just play, instead of trying to get those elaboration notes in between, you just play all the chords on every beat. You just play this, G minor 7, D flat 13, C minor 7, G flat 6, and then F minor 11, or F minor 7 without the third replaced by the fourth, or the 11th. So you get this once you start getting the melody in between. Da, 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 da. And you keep that top note, that pinky on that top note. It's just getting that sort of repeated melody idea, repeated melodic idea happening. It's really easy for people to grasp onto, especially when there's a lot of chords happening. You don't want to like create like several different patterns happening at once, or no pattern at all. From changing chord to changing chord. It's really easy to get lost in, both as a player, but also especially for audiences. Measure 16 is another one I want you to check out. It's a really nice ending for the second A section. It's kind of bluesy. Let me actually just pull it out again. It sounds like this. Ba 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 ba, and you get that sort of. Sorry. My bad. And it's simple. It's E flat, A flat 6, the 4 chord, but hitting the G flat, again, that G flat in the key of E flat major, so it gives that minor sound. The mixing of the major and minor sounds in a major key gives it that bluesiness. Right. Right, like sounds kind of bluesy, right? That's a really good one to learn. You can use that anywhere you want to fill in the gaps after a soloist is done. It'll probably give them ideas. They'll be like, well, I want to play something bluesy now, and they'll respond in kind. Again, it's that conversation, the back and forth, the call and response, the idea and the reply, right? Point and counterpoint and back again. Measures 21 and 22 are also really cool. You get this, this is the emblematic of that melody idea. So you have this melody that sounds like, it's the A minor 7 to D7, and then that backdoor F7 to G minor. This is the ending of or leading into the ending of the B section, right? Back to the final A. So right now it's about this D13, and instead of playing the A minor 7, we're actually going to just play 2 bars of D13. So you get this, an open D note, and this D13 sus chord, no third, sus because it's no third, but you got the 7th. Sorry, but you have the third replaced by the 2nd right now, the 9th. Right, it's very melodic, right? It's almost like a chord melody. And then we're there. The whole idea is that this part is pretty. It's a really good example of this like melody first comping approach. without the really big chords. We just have this static D7 harmony, and then it's primarily focused on the melody up top. Again, you can't do this when someone else is, or you have to be very choosy about how you do this when someone else is playing, when the soloist is playing a melody themselves. If it doesn't match, if it doesn't complement or counterpoint what they're playing in a way that's synergistic, then you're just stepping all over each other. It doesn't sound good. Finally, in the comping study, measure 31 to 32. That's 30, 31. That's just the last two bars in the in the comping study. It's again going back to this sort of this bluesy ending that you can use. So here's another ending that you can use for whether you're comping or playing a chord melody, because it ends on the tonic. It's really nice. But here's the ending of the tune. So that there is just a totally emblematic blues, a totally cliche blues ending. Ba 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 ba. Yeah, okay. So it just starts off with your typical E flat, the C shape, the cowboy open C shape, used for an E flat major chord, just like we were doing before. And then we have this E flat to E flat over G, or it's E flat 7, E flat dominant 7 over G, and that's where you get that part of the bluesy sound. And then we go to the 4 chord, A flat, and we're always coming back up to that tonic note, do da da, and we got the A diminished. We got this moving line heading to B flat. B flat, the 5 chord, that's where we're going to that ultimate climax. Tritone substitution, E7 sharp 9, tritone substitution of B flat, ending on E flat 7 sharp 9. The ultimate combination of a major chord with a minor third. Well, it's a sharp 9, but that's your blues chord right there. Your E flat 7 sharp 9, the Jimi Hendrix chord. So yeah, you get this. Really good. Learn that. I implore you. You got to have these endings under your belt, because how else are you supposed to end a song? You get to the end, you're like, what? So that's it for the comping study. And I know we're 10 minutes over time, but I do want to say a few words on the single note solo. This whole solo is blues oriented. How do you mix bebop jazz approach with blues lines? There's canonically a lot of really, really great jazz legends that that mix these two aspects together: blues guitar with jazz guitar, or or lines that are considered blues guitar and lines that are considered bebop lines, jazz guitar lines. You get musicians like Grant Green and like Wes Montgomery or George Benson or even Joe Pass, who they always come back to the blues and these juxtapositions between these bluesy, right. Going back and forth between those like really harmonically outlining lines, those harmonically rich lines, going to these really crunchy down and dirty blues lines. There's just something about that that's super powerful. Learn some blues licks so you can just play them over the song. Like I said, the whole idea is mixing the one minor with the song that's in, for a song that's in one major, mixing in the one minor sound. Right, and you get this bluesy sound where you wouldn't expect it otherwise. And it's great. The best example of the juxtaposition I was talking about is measures 11 through 14. This is during the bridge. So starting from 11, There's the 4 chord. And the 4 minor. Sorry, this isn't the bridge, my bad. Yeah, very bebop line, right? Stank face. There's that cliche blues ending, but voiced in a different way. So you get that super like, oh, look at this blues, this bebop, you know, like this really bebop heavy kind of line, and then immediately juxtaposed by this super crunchy blues line. It's great. So measures 11 through 14, followed by measure 15. Great juxtaposition. Check that out. There are a lot of double time lines in this, just like that one. But a couple things that I want to point out for all of these is there's a lot of like slurs and grace notes that aren't notated, but they're hallmarks of both jazz and blues articulation. Lots of similar roots, you know. Listen to how our guitarist Nicolas plays these lines. Like they're like copy the way that he is articulating them and get that sound into your ears. First of all, must learn lines. Measures 1 and 2, which includes the pickup. That's measure 1 is the pickup again, like I said in the sound slice. Measure 1 and 2, it's just this opening Chuck Berry line. It sounds like this. Sorry. And we got that targeting the third bebop ending to this blues line, right? Sorry. I'll let Nicolas play it. He's practiced it more. Let me take that back. That we aren't targeting the third of the B flat minor 7 chord when we hit it. We're talking the 13th of it, the G natural. But it was the third of the E flat chord that we just came from. So there's something to be said about mixing those. Anyway, it's like a classic Chuck Berry style line. You know, you really want to, you know, and so on and so forth, right? You really want to get that sort of sound going on, it feels like. Very similar to that. Measure 6, that's a great one. You can repeat it over and over and over again throughout the turnaround. It sounds like this. Major blues, minor blues. Well, over that part there, you could play what's there, but instead you could also do you could do it again. So you get and again and it sounds great if you do it that way. So so if you want to, it's a line that you can do again and again, but with those landing notes. You can harmonize those landing notes with a different chord underneath, and those landing notes are always E flat, the tonic. So it usually goes well with everything. So it sounds like there's the C. So we're starting on E flat. So 1, 2. Oh, sorry. 1, 2, 3. Beat 3. You're playing the C7 flat 9 or sharp 9 flat 13 chord, and then heading to beat 1 of the next bar, F7. And if you wanted to do it again, B flat sus is what you play after that. You probably and then we end on and it feels like the blues again. So if you repeat that line, it's something that people can grasp onto. If you harmonize it with something different underneath it each time, it just sounds really great. Measure 15, there's this really freaking awesome blues line that I love. That's the end of the juxtaposition that I was talking about before. Measures 11 to 14, the bebop stuff juxtaposed with the blues line. So here's just the blues line by itself. Learn that. Just learn that line, slow it down, start real slow, and then work it up to speed slowly. You can make it sound really good at slowly as well, but once you get it up to speed, you can just pull that lick out as an E-flat blues line, and it just sounds so good. You can just put that anywhere in an E-flat blues song, like literally anywhere in that song. Doesn't matter what the chords are, so long as you're still in the E-flat key. Then just you can play this E-flat blues line over any E-flat major bebop standard or jazz standard, and oh my god, it's going to sound amazing. People are like, whoa, what did you just do? That's crazy. And then you come back to the again, we're doing that cliche line again, or that cliche blues line. Okay, that's a cool one. I love that one. Measure 15 is great. Measure 24, check that out. Measure 24, we have this line. It just sounds cool. And actually, a bunch of lines in measure 24 and onward. There's a bunch of separate lines that are just really cool. I wouldn't suggest that they're must-learns. Some of them are a little bit esoteric, which is great. If you like that sound, learn it. But otherwise, move on. Measure 31, beats 3 to 4. That would be this part right here. Here's beat 1, then 2, then 3 and 4. Ba ba da da ba 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 ba. It's the same line but an octave down. Great. Like if you have this really cool line with that, the repeating top note up on tonic, right? Sorry. And then again, repeating line, top note, repeating top note, but then back to 6, right? If you can do that, if you can repeat it, you get this repeating pattern that people can latch onto, but sounds really cool because you're varying it by bringing it down an octave. Right, like it's cool. And once again, finally, there's a similar ending to that cliche blues ending in the comping study. There's a similar ending here in measure 32. Learn that. Learn all these bluesy endings, all these all these sort of like kind of cutesy universal kind of learn those endings as well, because they're just useful to have. You have all these endings you can do. You can always have these awesome turnarounds, and that makes a huge difference to your playing. So that's it for the that's it for Misty for this month. Thank you very much for tuning in, all of you who joined me. And I hope you enjoyed this live stream. I hope you learned something from it. There's a lot of really good stuff in there. I'd highly suggest that you learn those. I highly suggest that you learn those must-learn sections. Go through it again. Pick your favorite moments, and I hope it sheds some light on this tune. It's a tricky one sometimes. Oh, geez. I hope you guys can hear me. I think my microphone did something funny. God, I don't know when it did that. Hear me. I think my microphone did something funny. Everything's fine. Everything is fine. So thanks everybody for tuning in. Next month, again, third Wednesday of the month, we're tackling another jazz standard that we didn't work on. Sorry, we didn't have a webinar for before, so we're doing it, and it's Blue Bossa. That's our next one. It's on Wednesday, November the 20th at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we'll see you all then. So thank you very much, everybody, for joining me. And if you have any questions, contact me at nathan@jazzguitarlessons.net. Until then, happy shedding. Take care.